Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah. Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out and being over here for this webinar titled Changing Scenario of Chemical Industries and Education Post-COVID-19. I, Chandna, welcome you on behalf of Chemical and Biochemical Engineering Department in Drishil University. I'll begin the event with introducing the panelists, Dr. J.S. Yadav, Dr. Amish Vyas, Dr. Bharti Dave, Dr. Siddhant Patel, Dr. Alok Tripathi, Dr. Namrata Bajaj, Mr. Abhinand Pandya. Today, we have been joined with a very eminent speaker who is a Padma Shri awardee, a polymer chemist, inventor, institution builder, and a former director of NCL Pune, Professor Swaminathan Sivaram. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of Indrashil University. Now, I would like to introduce to Dr. J.S. Yadav. Dr. Yadav has retired as a director from IICT. He is presently associated with Indrashil University as a provost, director research, and trustee. He's a recipient of India's most prestigious scientific award, Shah Swaroop Bhatnagar Award, and many more national and international awards for his valuable contribution in the scientific world. He has guided more than 250 PhD scholars and has published more than 100 research publications in various reputed international journals. Most notably, he has been a much prominent and has more than 150 Indian and international patents registered to his credit. I request Dr. J.S. Yadav for opening remarks.
Thank you.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you hear? I don't.
Yes, sir.
I don't. Dr. Sivaram. I don't know where it is.
Yes, sir.
See me?
Dr. Sivaram. Now I can see. But Dr. Sivaram has been our very good friend for several years, and actually I suggested them that they should invite you.
Thank you.
Good speaker. He also gives the future direction in his talk. Very good. So I need to, since Indrashil University is starting up, I felt you are most appropriate speaker for today because we have one division of chemical engineering. Also, we have chemistry staff. So you are the one who nice bridge between both technology and science together. And Dr. Sivaram, we know as our colleague. We have been co-director together. He was in NCL, I was in IICT. We know not only professionally, personally for some time. So later on somebody is going to introduce. I will not take much time. Only I say that I'm very happy that he has accepted our invitation and today he will be delivering that talk. It is to you, Chandana.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Dr. Amish Vyas to speak up a few words on this occasion.
Good morning, one and all, and good morning, Professor Sivaram. It is indeed a nice initiation by the Chemical and Biochemical Engineering Department to understand the changes in the chemical engineering and industry scenario post-COVID-19, because this pandemic has changed a lot in industrial scenario, in employment scenario, in technological scenario also. So it is the high time to understand what are the changes taking place in the industry and in education also. And mostly those are very positive changes which we never thought of, that it would have been possible even in India and even in education scenario also. And today's speaker is the right person to highlight these kind of changes taking place in the education and industry, particularly in the chemical engineering sector. So thank you very much, and I am sure that everyone will get benefited out of today's session. Thank you very much, Professor Sivaram, for accepting our invitation. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your valuable words. I request the team to add Abhinand, sir, as he is in the attendee. Quickly, please.
Okay, we'll bring Abhinand at the end. Maybe.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Now, moving forward, I request Professor Bharti Dave, Dean of School of Sciences, to give a brief account on the Industrial University. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chandana. A very good morning to all. Just to brief you about our university, we are into the third year, a very young but beautiful university, I should say. So our university was established as a philanthropic initiative of our founding chancellor, Dr. Rajiv I. Modi, in loving memory of his parents, Shri Indravadan Bhai Ambalal Modi and Srimati Sheila Ben Modi, from whose name the name of the university is derived. So Shri Indravadan Bhai Modi is the founder chairman of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, popularly known as the medicine man of India. A core nationalist at heart, he truly believed that medicine should be affordable and should reach to the poorest of the poor of the country. And still Cadila Pharmaceuticals is continuing with this particular motto. If we see to the beginning of its historical journey of success, so when Cadila Pharmaceuticals was started in 1951, it is now one of the largest privately held pharmaceutical company for our country. Initially, it was just started in one small room in a village called as Hasot near Bharuch in Gujarat. And Shri Indravadan Bhai Modi is known, used to move around on a bicycle, marketing and selling his product. His wife, Srimati Sheila Ben Modi, was the first employee of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited. And in fact, it was she who constantly inspired Indravadan Bhai Modi to first indigenously manufacture the gripe water of our country, and which brought smiles to millions of parents across the country. So it was his firm belief in a self-reliant pharmaceutical industry, Atmanirbhar pharmaceutical industry, and his commitment to research and innovation that remained his lifelong mantra. So to honor the legacy of care and compassion, the university's governing body and Dr. Rajiv Modi are determined to holistically transform and develop this university into a global academic, into a hallmark of global academic excellence, both in terms of teaching as well as in terms of research. So if we see to the milestones of success that Industrial University has reached within a very short time. As I said, it was established in 1951. It is one of the largest privately held pharmaceutical company. It has about 10,000 employees. They initiated the education initiative in 2016 as Shri Saraswati Education Foundation. But it was in 2018 that Industrial University was established as the first life sciences university of our country. And seeing to the progress, you can see which our university attained within a very short period. Niti Aayog, Government of India in 2019 supported us with Atal Incubation Center with his flagship program to encourage youth of Gujarat to initiate their startups and become future entrepreneurs of our country. Again in 2019-20, Government of Gujarat supported us with Indrashil Innovative Foundation. Again in 2020, we have Industries Commissionerate of Gujarat, who have again supported us as a nodal agency for promoting startup and innovation for the students and young entrepreneurs of Gujarat. So the mentor of our university as an institution builder, you can say, is Dr. J.S. Yadav, the provost of our university, the director of research of our university, who has been the former director of IISER Hyderabad, who has been awarded with several national accolades to his credit, one of the, say, the highest awards which our country gives to our scientists, Shwanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, J.C. Bose National Fellow, 150 plus patents, number of publications, 250 PhD students, 27,000 citations, etc. So at Indrashil University, what we provide is academic excellence, both in terms of teaching and research. One of our major objectives is, since we have our university supported by Cadila Pharmaceuticals, we want the students to be industry ready once they step out of this university. So as this initiative, we provide enough industrial exposure to the students, both in terms of industrial internship as well as in terms of their placements. Overall development of the students is also looked at, both in terms of academics, research, curricular, co-curricular activities, and we have tried to reach global academic standards, even though we are into our third year. So under the umbrella of Indrashil University, we have School of Engineering, we have School of Science. School of Engineering offers BTech in Computer Science and Engineering, BTech in Mechanical Engineering, Chemical and Biochemical Engineering, whereas School of Science offers BSc Honors in Chemistry, BSc Honors in Biosciences. I am proud to say that we are the first university in Gujarat to offer honors degree at an undergraduate level. MSc in Chemistry, MSc in Animal Biology, MSc in Microbiology, and we offer PhD in both the programs. As I talk to you about global academic standards, we have international collaborations with Sacred Heart University, USA, Tuskegee University, USA, Newcastle University, Australia. At present, it is with computer science and engineering, where the students are required to do 3 years at our university, 1 year at their university. And what both the universities offer is a dual degree, both from Indrashil as well as foreign university. And it is this program which has been gained, you can say, widespread recognition among the parents and students of Gujarat. Needless to say, as we have Dr. J.S. Yadav as our provost and institution builder, we have a number of sophisticated throughput instruments with high state-of-the-art laboratory infrastructure facilities. But what we have procured at present is nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy. The cost, as everybody knows, is quite high. And our university is the first in Gujarat to have NMR. And this NMR is made available to both MSc as well as PhD students. We use it for quality control. We use it to determine the content and the purity of sample, a number of applications. So as our university is supported by Cadila Pharmaceuticals, we have academic linkages with a number of industries. Our parent industries, Cadila Pharmaceuticals, Karnavati Engineering, Entrepreneurship Development Institute of Jackson, Apollo Hospitals, Tata Consultancy Services, and we have entered into MOUs with about 3 CSIR laboratories. One is National Chemical Laboratory from Sir, where you belong. We have with Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, Hyderabad. We have with CDRI Lucknow, etc. CSMCRI Bhavnagar, where our students are placed for internships. So at Indrashil University, as I've already said, we provide 3 platforms for startups and entrepreneurship to the young innovators of Gujarat. One is Atal Incubation Center. The second is Indrashil Innovative Foundation, exclusively supported by Government of Gujarat. And the third is a nodal agency for promoting startup and innovation, which is exclusively supported by Industries Commissionerate of Gujarat. And what we offer at such incubation centers are world-class R&D laboratories, dedicated office and laboratory space, 50 lakhs as kickstart support, 2 crores as seed fund support, hand-holding by renowned mentors, which are from industries, government departments, agencies, R&D laboratories, and we provide 360-degree support for any innovator who wants to take up their startup to a sustainable business. So if you want more information on our university, you can reach to our website, you can email, and you can call the person contact at this number. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bharti ma'am, for enlightening the inspirational journey of Dr. Modi and his significant contribution towards the society and his visionary, which is carried out at Indrashil University. Thank you once again. Now, I request Dr. Siddhant Patel to introduce the key speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Hello. Am I audible? Yeah, okay.
Yes, you are.
It's my immense pleasure and privilege to introduce such an eminent personality. I think sir doesn't require an introduction, but as he is already Padma Shri awardee. But it's our in a formal way. I'll introduce sir. So sir has worked immensely in the field of chemical research, and Indian government has recognized his research by awarding him a very prestigious award called Padma Shri in the year of 2006. Sir has an enormous achievement, and if I will try to list down that, I think whole session will be taken. But I'll list few. Sir has worked with as a senior scientist with IPCL Berda. He has headed the polymer chemistry division of NCL Pune for almost 14 years, and then he also directed or work as a director for furthermore 8 years. Sir became a CSR Bhatnagar Fellow, which is a prestigious fellowship, and later he became JC Bose Fellow. Then right now, sir is working with IISER Pune and Kolkata as an honorary professor and guiding the IISER Pune and Kolkata. Sir has achieved many prestigious awards on a national and even international level. Has recognized sir's research and his contribution in the field. So sir is a distinguished fellow. Here I am listing few. Sir is a distinguished fellow of International Engineering and Technology Institute. He has also received a gold medal, which is a lifetime achievement in a chemical research and chemical research society of India. He has received international award from Society of Polymer Science from Japan, Distinguished Material Science of the Year award in the from Material Science Society of India, Honorary Doctor of Science from Purdue, USA. He is elected fellow of Indian National Science Academy. He is also elected fellow for the World Academy Science TWS Italy. Sir is also a fellow of IUPAC and Royal Society of Chemistry UK. Sir has also received Lifetime Achievement Award for contribution to Indian chemical industry from Indian Chemistry Council, and there are many more. Sir has published more than 250 research articles in a peer-reviewed journal, and he has 51 US patents and 52 Indian patents. And Sir has guided 40 PhD theses, 20 masters, and 15 postdoctoral fellows. Sir is also providing his expertise to very well-known industries such as Reliance Industries, Mumbai, Atul Chemicals, Valsad, Expanded Polymers System Limited, Mumbai. He is mentoring many startups as well and sharing his expertise with startup industries such as Solarity Initiatives Private Limited, Bhubaneswar, Form 3D Solutions Limited. Sir is also member of board of director of very well-known companies such as Asian Paint Limited, Mumbai, Deepak Nitrite, Baroda, Supreme Petrochemicals, Mumbai, and many. I think we couldn't get a better person for opening of our Gujko's series of webinar and who can guide us towards the future of chemical science and engineering, its research, industry, and education. As Sir is excelling each and every section, you can see from his this CV that Sir has achieved everything in the field. So I think I won't take much time because every minute is important from Sir's point of view. So, sir, now I'll hand over this session and please enlighten us with your wisdom.
Yeah. So before you start, just a moment. Just this is an announcement for the participants. Like we would be running a live Q&A session. So anyone, any doubts, if you have, please write down the chat box is right below your screen. Thank you, sir. Now it's over to you.
And there is one more announcement. The feedback link will be provided in chat box. So please give us feedback. On that you'll get the certificate. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm just going to the full presentation mode. So please confirm whether you can see it. Okay.
Awesome.
You can see it?
No, sir.
No?
No.
Can you see it? No.
No, sir. No.
Now can you see it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
sometimes I don't know. Sometimes on the it works on the other mode, but it doesn't work on the presentation mode. I don't know why. So
Yeah, now it's seen, sir.
now you are seeing, but I'm going to just take it to the presentation mode once more. See whether you can see it. Now you can't see it, right?
Now we can see it,
Oh,
sir.
you can see it. Okay, all right, good. Thank you.
Okay.
So it is
Thank
on
you so much.
presentation mode. Thank you very much, my colleagues Chandana and Amish Vyas, Siddhant Patel. Of course, my special thanks to Dr. Yadav, a good friend of mine for over 3 decades, and I've been meaning to physically visit your university. He has been calling me, but for some reason it has not happened. And the last 1 year we are not traveling anywhere. So I guess this is the only way we can now communicate. Okay. Otherwise, I do come to Ahmedabad quite frequently. So I was planning to visit you one of these days when I am there. Thank you for your kind invitation for this talk. Now, I just want you to note down my email address. Those of you, the listeners who are interested, I will share my presentation with you with the organizers after my lecture, and you can make it available to anybody whom you think is interested. Okay. The point is that I don't want people to take notes, okay? Because then the attention is not on the speaker. So I would rather you listen to me, and this presentation that I'm going to show it to you. I will send a copy to Dr. Siddhant Patel, and in any one of you who is interested can contact him and get a copy. Okay. So, but the reason is there are some references and things like that that you may wish to look up at your leisure. The second thing is, although your topic said COVID-19, this is nothing to do with COVID-19. Okay, so this is basically a retrospective and a prospective thinking about where is chemical science and engineering today and where is it going. Now, I thought this could be of interest to all of you because you're all teachers and you are training the next generation of professionals in this field. And therefore, it is important for you to know to some extent where this field is currently at present, where is this field and where is this field moving, or where do we think it is moving in the future. Because when you train students, please understand you are training students who are going to be professionals 25 years from today, not today. And therefore, they have to learn today that will equip themselves in order to be successful professionals about 20 years from today. So I think that's the goal. So this is just it is purely my personal view. If you ask many different people, you may get multiple views, but this is my personal view. The second thing is, I'm not a trained chemical engineer, which is kind of sad because I'm talking to you on chemical engineering. I never was trained in chemical engineering. In fact, Dr. Yadav will tell you that I am a hardcore organic chemist by training. Okay, I mean, I did my PhD with Herbert C. Brown, which many of you must recognize as one of the eminent organic chemists of this century. Now, the point I'm trying to make is much of what I have understood as chemical engineering is something that I've understood in practice in my professional life, because I have worked in industry and I have worked with industry, and therefore it is that kind of a learning that I've acquired from my practice. So I'm not trained, I have not been trained in chemical engineering. I don't have a degree in chemical engineering. So that is the caveat that you should know, that my background is not in chemical engineering, but I'm going to talk about engineering. The reason is also because I don't think there is much of a difference between science and engineering today. In fact, the entire boundaries between science and engineering has vanished in the last 20 years. There was a time when these boundaries were very, very distinct, but as you will hear from me in the next few minutes, these boundaries no longer exist. And therefore, to me, I speak about science and engineering in the same breath. To me, it means the same to me. It's just a way of looking at a problem that is slightly different. So let me get started with this preamble. What I'm going to be talking about is, especially if there are students here, I hope that there are students in this audience. I'm just going to give you a little history because I always find that students don't understand history of science. And to me, history of science is extremely important. I will not have a time to dwell deep into the history of science. It's a fascinating subject, but I will kind of introduce a little bit of the history. I will talk about the present structure and future dimensions of chemistry. And you may wonder why I'm talking about chemistry, because chemistry and chemical engineering are inseparable. Okay, I mean, they have a common destiny, chemistry and chemical engineering, and therefore you cannot divest chemical engineering from chemistry. And I hope that all of your students who are doing chemical engineering, apart from the fact that they have to understand physics and mathematics, I think they have to be deeply understanding chemistry, because without a deep understanding of chemistry, you cannot be, in my opinion, a successful chemical engineer. I'll just talk about a little bit, nothing much, because I want the students to understand what really shaped modern chemical engineering. Okay, And the modern chemical engineering was shaped by two disciplines of science, and that is, one is called catalysis and the other is polymer science. And I think, to me, there is no doubt about it that these are the two broad disciplines that defined chemical engineering from at least from 1950 onwards, 1950 to around 2000. Uh, I'll talk about the forces that shape the future of chemical engineering. I'll talk about some of the challenges in chemical engineering. And of course, the lastly, which is I think the most important part, and I think this is something that must become a part of the curriculum of chemical engineering. I will introduce to you the critical and the crucial role of chemical engineering in sustainable development. And I think if those of you who are teaching chemical engineering, and I'll show you some resources at the end of my talk, and there are enough resources today in the published literature how to introduce this discipline into curriculum. I hope that you introduce to chemical engineers the concept of sustainable development and how do we understand sustainable development. In fact, just last semester, I did a full semester course for students of chemistry, fourth year and fifth year master's chemistry, on the role of sustainable development in chemistry. Okay, and I did a full semester course in IISER Calcutta, and I think this is the kind of a thing that we must also introduce to chemical engineering, and I think it is very, very important as we go forward. So, what is the journey of chemical engineering? The journey, just 2 slides of journey, okay? It's a 100-year journey, okay? It's not that old. Chemistry is around 300 years old. I hope you know that. Chemistry is around 250 to 300 years old from the time we understood chemistry as a discipline of science. But chemical engineering is just about 100 years old, okay? It's about 100, 110 years old. It's actually relatively a young discipline, but it's a mature discipline today. And why did chemical engineering ever start as a discipline? You should go and ask the question, why did we create a discipline like chemical engineering? Okay, the reason was that, chemistry as a discipline, and those of us who are chemists will understand that chemistry at the turn of the 19th century, around early part of 1800s, was actually going through a crisis of identity. You know, physics and mathematics were considered as noble sciences. Okay, in fact, there was a Newton for physics. There were eminent mathematicians, people like Lagrange and people like Fourier. They were great mathematicians who created the mathematical sciences. The chemistry lacked somebody like a Newton or somebody like a Fourier or a Lagrange. And chemistry was therefore considered to be somewhat ordinary science. Okay, in fact, many people didn't even believe chemistry was a science because chemistry was largely considered as a craft because it's something that you did in a laboratory. Please imagine the physics in those days, you did not do it in the laboratory. Physics was basically discovery of natural laws. Mathematics was also discovery of natural laws. But chemistry is something that you have to go into a laboratory and perform in order to find out what's going to happen. And therefore, chemistry was considered to be an empirical science. You couldn't predict anything. You have to perform an experiment to find an answer. And therefore, it was called an empirical science. And this aspect of chemistry actually stigmatized the discipline. In fact, this is one of the reasons why, where there were departments of physics and departments of mathematics in the universities way back in the 18th century, even in around the beginning of 19th century, there was no department of chemistry in anywhere in the world. In fact, the first department of chemistry was established at the University of Uppsala around 1840. Okay, there was no departments of chemistry because people didn't think that chemistry was a discipline worthy of study. It was something that you could do it as a practice. You could be an apprentice in a workshop and learn chemistry. In fact, Immanuel Kant, who was possibly one of the major Western philosophers, once said that chemistry will never become a true science because the principles thereof are purely empirical, envisioning a priori representation of perception. So this is the thoughts of the day. And because of this, chemistry started splitting into two parts. One was called pure and the other was called applied. Now, the pure chemistry was actually an attempt by the chemist to elevate the level of chemistry to that of physics and mathematics. They wanted chemistry to be respected as a science, just like mathematics and physics was being respected at that point of time. And therefore, the pure chemistry emerged to elevate the prestige of chemistry to the status enjoyed by mathematics and physics. But then, in spite of all that, chemistry never natural sciences, the mathematics and physics. And therefore, chemistry, the other part of the chemistry which was more utilitarian, which was more useful, was called applied chemistry. And therefore, chemistry became pure, okay? And this was something which is very strange because at that time, no other discipline of science was called pure and applied. In fact, if you imagine, if you know that in around 1840, the scientists, the kids of the world created an organization which exists even today, and it is called the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. It is IUPAC, and I hope you know what IUPAC is, International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. So imagine, even in 1840, when they organized themselves into a society, into a kind of a society, they had to call itself International Union of Applied Pure and Applied Chemistry, IUPAC, which is even today we have an IUPAC that defines chemistry in the society today. Okay, so the point is this applied chemistry became the anchor for chemistry because chemistry was extremely useful. And because it's useful, people were all the time looking at how to apply the knowledge of chemistry in the society and create wealth in the society. And therefore, applied chemistry was the one that, in a way, led to the founding of the discipline of chemical engineering. Because now you can see here, the gentleman who actually created the discipline of chemical engineering is George Davis, who was born in 1850, who died in 1907, and he is the one who figured out the basic principles of applied chemistry. And he called this discipline the kind of principles of applied chemistry that can be applied in chemical factories, and he called it chemical engineering. And in fact, he is a man who gave the name chemical engineering to the world of science. And he wrote a book in 1901, imagine, just 120 years ago. And that book was called A Handbook of Chemical Engineering. And this was the first time that chemical engineering appeared in title of a published manuscript. And this has stayed after that as a discipline for the last 120 years. Now, George Davis was not a chemical engineer by any chance. He was actually a chemist. And he therefore, and this is the legacy of chemical engineering. Chemical engineering does not distinguish between chemistry and chemical engineering. I think there are many good chemists who later on became good chemical engineers, and lots of good chemical engineers have actually become chemists and biologists in the recent time. And I think this is something which is unique about this discipline. There is no other discipline of science where this kind of an intermingling of discipline has occurred. But the man who really created the teaching of chemical engineering was actually Louis Morton. Louis Morton was a professor of chemistry at MIT. Imagine, because there was no department of chemical engineering. So he was a professor of chemistry at MIT, and he wrote also a book called The Outlines of Industrial Chemistry, and he also started teaching it in MIT in Boston. And this course, he did not know what to call it, because he said this cannot be called a course in chemistry, but he did not know what else to call, so he called it Course X. And this Course X became the first teaching course in chemical engineering. And this is a very interesting history. This Course X of MIT is a historical course that became the foundation of chemical engineering education in this world. And of course, subsequently, many people came in and they enlarge the scope of chemical engineering. And I think I need to just, those of you who are young students, must remember three names here. Okay, Arthur D. Little, who coined this term unit operations. I'm sure you must have all studied unit operations. And he is the one who coined this term. Warren Lewis was a physical chemist at MIT who actually wrote the second authoritative book in chemical engineering after the George Davis book. And this was called The Principles of Chemical Engineering, which he published in 1923 with William Walker. And this was the first textbook in chemical engineering. And this became, in fact, the whole generation of chemical engineers grew up on this particular textbook. And of course, William Walker, who was his collaborator in that book, was actually an organic chemist. And he established actually the School of Chemical Engineering practice at MIT. And he established a separate school, which was the School of Chemical Engineering practice at MIT in 1917, which today, of course, is a very famous department of chemical engineering and one of the foremost departments of chemical engineering in the world, and that is at MIT at Boston, Cambridge, Boston. So this is a quick history of chemical engineering. The reason I want you to understand here this intricate relationship between chemistry and chemical engineering. And you can see here the founders of the discipline of chemical engineering were actually physical and organic chemists. And there is no reason why, therefore, chemical engineering is not a distinct discipline. It is an interdisciplinary discipline that merges in a way at the interface of chemistry and chemical engineering. Well, if I have to say that, all I will say that imagine this, 1917, the first school was established. 1923, the first book was written. But then, this is an amazing thing, and I call this the crowning glory of chemical engineering. In 1913, Haber and Bosch had already built the first ammonia plant in BASF in Germany. Now, I don't want to get into the details of this because this is probably considered to be the pinnacle of chemical engineering. And I think what we talk about chemical engineering, and look at this, Fritz Haber was a physical chemist and Karl Bosch was quote unquote chemical engineer, although that name did not exist at the time. He was working the plant of BASF. And this was a collaboration between Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch that led to this so-called Haber-Bosch process for ammonia, which I will not elaborate today because Haber-Bosch process, I think, is a quintessential process that defines the power of chemical engineering and how the chemical engineering principles established for us the first ammonia manufacturing technology in the world. Now, I will not elaborate on many of the things on the slide. If those of you are interested in this fascinating history of ammonia, please read a book that was published just 2008. This is a novel. This is not a chemistry book or an engineering book. Anyone can read it. This is called The Alchemy of Air. It's a fascinating book. And I will recommend that every student of chemical engineer read this book because this tells you the process of creating an engineering solution and the pain that one has to go through when you have to create an engineering solution. And you can, I see here, I quote here in this box as a statement by Karl Bosch. And the reason I quote here is that this is a typical thing that we face even today. The chemists come up with a chemistry, which is a new chemistry, okay? But that new chemistry is not ready for most reasons to be converted into a technology, okay? And that's where we need this powerful collaboration between chemistry and chemical engineering. And you look at this, Haber discovered the process with 15% ammonia conversion around 175 atmosphere using an osmium and uranium catalyst. None of these is practical for industry. And what did Bosch did? He converted this process into a 350 degrees process at 150 atmosphere with an iron catalyst. And even today, the ammonia uses an iron catalyst. Okay, so this is an amazing transformation of a discovery of a new science into a technology by Karl Bosch. And what he said was that there were many challenges. What were the challenges? These were supply of raw materials. How do you get hydrogen? In those days, there was no hydrogen available. How do you get nitrogen? Nitrogen was not available at a lower price than hitherto possible. So you can imagine the economic criteria of an engineering discipline comes here. The manufacturing of effective and stable catalyst. In the laboratory, we can work with any catalyst, but in a plant, I have to have certain characteristics of catalyst. And lastly, the construction of the apparatus. Apparatus, he meant the engineering of the reactor. And that was the reactor I show here on the left-hand side of the slide, the first reactor designed by Bosch that was installed at a place called Oppau in Germany to produce ammonia. Now, this is an amazing technology, the reactor, because can you imagine? No metal can withstand hydrogen at 175 at 150 atmospheres at 350 degrees centigrade. There is a process in metallurgy called hydrogen embrittlement, and no metal can withstand hydrogen. Okay, and how did Bosch create a metal reactor for hydrogen at these high pressures and temperatures? And that's what, if you want to understand this, go and read Alchemy of Air, and you will see what Bosch did in order to create this new technology. And this is why I say this is a confluence of some of the finest chemistry and finest engineering. And that has gave us today an ammonia plant, which I think we all realize what a valuable resource ammonia has been for the population of the world. Now, you must also understand that this problem is even current today. Okay, this problem is not over, because ammonia is a process that emits 2% of the global CO2 today. Okay, the entire ammonia production of the world contributes to 2% of our CO2 emission. And as you know, we are moving towards a possible situation where by 2050 or 2060, there should be no incremental CO2 production. That's called the net zero carbon target. And if I have to move to net zero carbon target, I have to understand how do I reduce the CO2 emissions from an ammonia plant. And this is a problem for the chemical engineers really today. And I think this is a real problem for chemical engineers, because ammonia is highly energy intensive, and therefore it produces a lot of carbon dioxide. So the point I'm taking is 100 years old technology, 1913, 1915, and yet we still have challenges with this technology today. And chemical engineers are the people who will find a solution to this problem. So this is just a history of chemical engineering. All right. So what is chemical engineering? How did it move? It started from chemistry. Then we called what is called applied chemistry, and that's what I showed you. Then we moved into chemical technology, which was practice intensive, but somewhat empirical. And then we moved into chemical engineering, which is system intensive and more rational. And that is the way we have moved on this journey. And in the process, what we have done is we have taken inventions of chemistry, like the invention of the ammonia process by Fritz Haber, and we created value out of this invention that people will pay for, innovation. And that was what Bosch did. And therefore, if I look at this Haber-Bosch process, is actually a journey from chemistry to chemical engineering. And that confluence of chemistry and chemical engineering is what led to this revolutionary processes. And I think there are more examples of these processes than I just gave one example, but there are many more examples of such processes. So what do chemical engineers do? They really create value out of inventions that people will pay for, because ultimately an innovation is something that for which you and I will pay for it. Okay, I mean, if I'm not willing to pay for it, there is no innovation. Okay, so I think that is the most important lesson that we must learn from this history that I briefly talked about. All right. So therefore, this is again repeating of the same paradigm. There are two things in science. Some things are possible and some things are practical. Okay, the possible is the realm of invention. The practical is the realm of innovation. And I think the chemical engineers make the possible practical. Okay, So I think, to me, if you ask me what is chemical engineering, all they do is they make the possible practical. Okay, so otherwise everything will stay as invention, and that's not the most important outcome of any science. Well, if those of you, and I think this is, I'm not even saying those of you, but I think this book, this is a book which you can download it from the web free of cost. It must be compulsory reading by all students of chemical engineering. And this was written in 1988. It is not a book, it was actually a report. And this was done by one of the giants of chemical engineering, Neil Amundsen of the University of Minnesota. And Neil Amundsen was considered to be the father in those days, in the early 80s, of chemical engineering. And he wrote a kind of an analysis of the future of chemical engineering in 1988. And I think this should be compulsory reading in the classroom, because it defines what chemical engineering is all about. And the important part of it is that Amundsen, with all his prescience, he actually predicted a few things in the future. And it's amazing how these predictions have actually come true. And therefore, in retrospect, because this report is almost now 30 years old, and if you want to look at this report today, you will look at it with a great sense of, remarkable prescience of Amundsen, because Amundsen could see this future and he created this report. And I think this should become compulsory reading for all students of chemical engineering. It's available. You can download it free from the web, so it doesn't cost anything. You can download it free from the web, and I think this is very important. By the way, the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine in the United States is currently commissioned another study to update Neil Amundsen's Frontiers in Chemical Engineering. This new report will come in 2022, which will look at the next 30 years of chemical engineering. And this work is currently in progress, and this will be published by the end of 2022, which will now look at the next 30 years of chemical engineering and where this discipline is moving in the future. Well, so what is chemical engineering today? And that's what I said. It is a unique position to interface between molecular sciences and engineering. Chemistry, physics, material science is all molecular sciences, and engineering, it connects the fundamental subjects of chemistry, biology, mathematics, and physics to other disciplines like material science, computer science, mechanical, electrical, civil engineering. And chemical engineers actually unite chemistry, physics, biology, mathematics, and economics to add value to raw materials and convert into useful products and processes that consumers can use. It has traditionally came from more of fuel, energy background, but today it is moving into medicine, biotechnology, microelectronics, advanced materials, manufacturing, and environmental solutions. And I think, therefore, the scope of chemical engineering is much broader than it was, let's say, 50 years ago. Now, what is this? Now, I always say that chemistry drives, to some extent, chemical engineering. And therefore, I'm just going to give you 2 slides on what is the present structure and future dimensions of chemistry. Structure of chemistry is being predominantly laws, axioms, theories, concepts, and principles. It has a spatial dimension, it has a temporal dimension, and then it ultimately relates structure to properties to functions. And that's the goal of chemistry. And therefore, this is the way chemistry is moving. And if you want to therefore look at chemistry today, it is basically structure, dynamics, and function. And when I talk about structure, dynamics, and function in chemistry, I also, in a way, erase the boundaries between chemistry and biology, which is essentially what is happening today. Because whether it is chemistry or biology, we are actually looking at structure, dynamics, and functions. And therefore, there is no difference between chemistry and biology in a kind of a paradigm of this sort. And therefore, molecules can be organic, inorganic, biologically derived, small, big, single molecules, assemblies of molecules, with a range of inter and intramolecular forces. So if I use that kind of a broad definition for molecules, every molecule that we know of today falls within this paradigm of structure, dynamics, and function. And I have argued for the last several years that why do we teach chemistry and biology as two distinct disciplines? We should integrate the teaching of chemistry and biology into one discipline as structure, dynamics, and functions. Well, that's easier said than done, but I think at least at advanced level, this understanding must be there that chemistry and biology are no different. The reason I'm saying it, that since chemistry is moving increasingly towards biology, biology also becomes very important to chemical engineering. And therefore, all students of chemical engineering, in opinion, must compulsorily study some elements, fundamentals of biology. And I hope that in your university, you teach chemical engineering students with some basic biology. It's extremely important for the future. And therefore, I call this biology and chemistry, they're not different. To me, they are two sides of the same coin. And I only feel little rejected because even today in most institutions, students of chemistry don't read biology, or students of biology or life sciences don't read too much of chemistry. And this is actually a little bit, uh, you know, uh, uh, not correct in my opinion. And in fact, I show this slide to many people. Uh, you know, uh, we talk about Nobel Prize, right, as one of the highest prizes that people can win in discipline. And this is what is called Nobel Prize in Chemistry. And look at 2016, 17, 18, and 20. Okay. Now just read the title of the Nobel Prize winning work and ask yourself, if you are a chemist, is this chemistry? Or the people who award Nobel Prizes are stupid? What is the reason that Nobel Prize for chemistry is being awarded to people who are talking about phage display of peptides, directed evolution of enzymes, and method for genome editing? Either they are stupid or we are stupid. I don't know. I mean, you can discuss amongst yourself and decide whether the Nobel Prize authorities in chemistry are stupid or we are stupid. And my answer is, of course, that we are stupid, especially in our educational institutions, because we have separated chemistry and biology so much. In fact, many students of chemistry will never even understand the titles of these Nobel Prize winning work. And therefore, how many chemists that we know of can identify these areas as belonging to the discipline of chemistry? And most chemists will say this is not chemistry, but I argue that this is indeed chemistry because it is basically defines structure, function, and dynamics. And I think that to me is chemistry. And therefore, if you want to look at chemistry as an interplay of structure, function, and dynamics, to me, this is all chemistry. Well, therefore, the future dimensions of chemistry, I call it, this is what I call the future dimensions of chemistry, is science of materials, science of sustainability, and the science of life and nature. And this is where all the biology comes in, okay? The science of life and nature. And therefore, if I'm looking at chemical engineering as something which chemistry pushes in the forward direction, which is what I showed you in my earlier slide, then I think we need to understand material science, sustainability, and life sciences as a key driver of future chemical engineering. And therefore, in your core curriculum, when you teach chemistry to chemical engineering students, make sure that they understand these dimensions of chemistry and not the classical dimensions of chemistry, which in my opinion is somewhat outdated. Well, chemistry is therefore, in my opinion, is basically the journey from molecule to devices. And this is in the example of materials. And therefore, today we are looking at more and more of devices, and devices are multi-component structures. And that's where chemical engineering comes in, because it's impossible for chemists to think about multi-component hierarchical structures. And chemical engineers are the people who look at these kinds of structures. And therefore today, if you look at the entire area of material science, where the beginning of this material science is molecules, the end is actually devices which have functions and responses. Okay. And therefore, in this journey, which is what I talk about, the molecule to device journey, you have chemists and chemical engineers working together. And this is a classic example of how chemists and chemical engineers will create new value in material science. Well, I just want to talk about two disciplines that shaped modern chemical engineering. And one of them is catalysis, the other is polymers, because much of it happened beyond 1940 to 1945. It's a post-World War II development when we started exploiting crude oil as a resource for organic chemicals. And as a crude oil, you could either use it as a fuel or energy for transportation, electricity or heating, or you could use it as a feedstock to produce chemicals for polymers and pharmaceuticals and fine chemicals and so on and so forth. So hydrocarbons were the basic feedstock that we were using to build the organic chemical industry. And therefore, in this industry, in order to build the organic chemical industry, we needed two disciplines. And that became mature in the early part of 1950s. And that was catalysis science and polymer science. And both of them are extremely important science. I don't have time to dwell deep into this, but catalysis science essentially led to the hydrocarbon cracking and the synthesis and the manufacture of olefins, which led to the entire downstream chemical industry, aromatics, olefins, so on and so forth. I just show here one picture of Vladimir Ipatiev, who was a Russian chemist who is considered to be the father of the petroleum cracking industry, and he's a catalytic cracking industry. And he was a formidable force in the 1940s. He published 300 papers, 200 patents, and was nominated 10 times for the Nobel Prize, but never won. And he was the one who created the aromatics industry, the olefin industry, the paraffin industry, the everything that we consume today as a building blocks for organic chemical. And he was the one who really gave us the tools of both catalysis and engineering to build commercial manufacturing facilities for hydrocarbons. And this is now embedded in every refinery and petrochemical operation that we see today. And this is the beginning of this, and he was the man who created this industry. And similarly, polymer, because once we had the olefins, once we had the feedstocks, people discovered that we could convert them into long and large molecules called macromolecules. And polymers grew extremely fast, is today a 400 million ton industry, 1 billion jobs, and about 1.2 trillion per annum revenue. It's a huge creator of both jobs and value in the society. And polymers also led to explosive developments in chemical engineering, because you had to build manufacturing plants to make polymers. And polymers are a little different from organic chemicals, and therefore there were new challenges in design of a manufacturing plant in the area of polymers. So, in fact, I just show you one slide to show this what I call an amazing confluence of convergence, or a spectacular convergence of chemistry and chemical engineering. Many of you may know it or may not know it, but let me tell you again. There is one polymer which is called low density polyethylene, which you nowadays detest because it is a single-use plastic that you buy a carry bag and you throw it away. Okay, it's a low density polyethylene, but it's a fascinating chemical reaction. It is conducted at 3000 atmospheres pressure at 250 degrees centigrade. And you know what? When this technology was developed, there was no compressor that could generate a pressure of 3000 bar. And therefore, a compressor technology has to be developed. Can you imagine that you didn't have an equipment and yet you make a polymer? And this is a polymer that is made. I mean, even in this country, there are several locations where this polymer is made. And this plant operates on a continuous basis at 3000 atmosphere pressure. Can you imagine that? If I said that you can do a chemical reaction and make it one of the cheapest product in the world at 3000 bars, many of you may say, how is it possible? Think about it. You could actually conduct polymerization in water. Can it be anything can be more greener than this in environmental point of view? And this is emulsion polymerization. All your automotive tires, all the tires on which your two-wheelers and four-wheelers are running are made out of styrene butadiene rubber, which is actually made in water. Okay, so it is an organic monomer which is polymerized in water, and that's, I mean, I can't think of a greener process than this. By the way, when emulsion polymerization process was discovered and commercialized, we did not have this term green chemistry. Okay, chemical reaction which is performed at minus 100 degrees centigrade, and that is a rubber that we use in all your vehicles today. Okay, and this is called the butyl rubber. And you know what? When this process was discovered, there was no material of construction or metal which could withstand minus 100 degrees centigrade and not undergo what is called brittle failure. And therefore, they had to discover a new alloy in order to run a chemical reaction at minus 100 degrees centigrade. And also, they did not know how to cool a reactor at minus 100 degrees centigrade. Please understand, liquid nitrogen boils at minus 78. This is even cooler or colder than liquid nitrogen. So, and this is a commercial polymer, okay? Right in Surat, Reliance makes this in large quantities day in and day out. So how come these processes became commercial in spite of the fact that they have such reaction conditions? And lastly, high density and linear low density polyethylene, which all of you use every day in your life, is a polymer where you just contact a gas, ethylene, with a catalyst. No solvent, no medium, nothing. It's a gas phase reaction in a fluidized bed gas reactor. Okay. And in fact, this fluidized bed reactor actually became a mature technology because of high density and linear low density polyethylene. And today, all the high density and linear low density polyethylene, almost 80% of what we consume, are made in very efficient fluidized bed reactors, where the only reactants are a small amount of catalyst and ethylene gas and nothing else. Again, can you think of a greener process than this? And that produces polyethylene in a powder form in 100% conversion. There is no waste, there is no effluent, there is no solvent. How can it be any greener than this? That's what chemical engineering has done in polymer science. Therefore, what I'm trying to say is these were the most innovative chemical engineering that came as a result of the discovery of polymers. Well, this is all very nice because this is all past. The question basically is, what is the future? Okay. So I just quote here George Bernard Shaw, who said, "We are not made wise by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility of the future." So the question basically is, as we are standing in this crossroad, as we are in this juncture today, what is the future of chemical engineering and what is our responsibility in order to deliver the future? So let me spend a few minutes on that. I don't know how much time I will have, but let me quickly run through some of my slides. The future of chemical engineering, in my opinion, depends on many challenges. And I show here these challenges: decarbonization, dematerialization, getting more from less, conservation of energy, sustainable use of water, reducing waste, human health and safety, impact of chemicals on human and mammalian biology, regulation and public policies, stakeholder activism. Please understand that chemical industry is at the receiving end from the citizens of the world. Okay, they don't like chemical industry. Okay, so we have to satisfy our stakeholders that we are responsible people who will produce chemicals and materials and everything in a manner that is less harmful to the society. Well, that's the challenges. And what are the solutions? Well, we have to improve process efficiency. We have to develop processes with lower specific energy consumption. I talked about ammonia to you, because the more energy you consume, the more carbon dioxide load on the environment. Use of renewable resources, low energy separation processes, net zero carbon manufacturing. That means during the entire manufacturing process, I don't have any carbon emission. Okay, And this is called the net zero carbon target that every company, every country is now trying to define for itself. Zero liquid discharge, process intensification and smaller plant footprint, and distributed manufacturing. One of the biggest costs in chemical manufacturing, especially large chemical manufacturing, is transportation. And transportation again leads to CO2 emission. And therefore, if you're looking at reducing CO2 emission, I have to minimize transportation. And therefore, the logistics of the supply chain has to be looked into, it has to be relooked at this point of time. Earlier, we could make large quantities in one location and move the product to different customers' location. But today, maybe there is a different way of looking at things which may be more relevant to the current environment. Well, in fact, I call this chemistry and chemical engineering is holy grail. In fact, this is an area which is even today in active research. Even today you open a journal like Science or Nature, occasionally you will find papers on the subject. Okay. Essentially, this world has three raw materials which we can use it to build chemical industry. Okay. Nitrogen, water, and carbon dioxide. Okay. Now, the nitrogen plus hydrogen was what was the Haber-Bosch process for ammonia, but I said, I just now told you this requires a relook because this is too energy intensive. How do I convert water to hydrogen? Well, there are solutions, but it's still not as good as it should be. How do I convert carbon dioxide and hydrogen to carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons and fine chemicals? Okay. And how do I convert carbon dioxide to carbon monoxide? Now you may say these are so simple, right? Those of you who are chemical engineers, please do some energy calculations. And you will understand why these things are not so simple. Because there are huge energy penalty that you will have to pay in terms of the conversion. And those of you who are chemical engineers should actually look at these very carefully, because this is an extremely important component of chemical engineering education. Because this is the future of chemical engineering. And this will require new catalysis, this will require new processes and everything under the window. But the question is, today, we cannot perform any of the above reaction without paying an unacceptable energy penalty. And that's the challenge for chemical engineers. So I call this the holy grail, and I think this is where we'll start seeing changes in the future. So what are the challenges? There are 3-4 big challenges in chemical engineering. One is, of course, separations. And separation is actually the fundamentals on which chemical engineering began. In fact, distillation, okay, crystallization, evaporation, these were considered to be standard processes, what we call the unit operations in chemical engineering. Okay, and many of you who probably studied the unit operations must have studied things like distillation, evaporation, so on and so forth, crystallization, so on and so forth. Now, I just give you 1 or 2 examples to highlight the humongous challenge that we face. Ethylene is produced by cracking ethane. It's a gas cracker. Now you have to separate ethylene from ethane at the end of the reaction. You know how we do it today? In all the gas crackers that are operating in the world, we do what is called a cryogenic distillation. We have to do a distillation at low temperature. And I know what temperature we distill them? At minus 160 degrees centigrade. Can you believe? That's how we produce ethylene. We distill them at minus 160 degrees centigrade. You go to, any of the cracker that is working in Surat, Hazira, in Jamnagar, in Nagotane, you go anywhere, okay, in Haldia, and this is the temperature at which the distillation column is working, minus 160 degrees. And can you believe that this alone around the world consumes 0.3% of the global energy use, okay? And this 0.3% corresponds to the total energy consumption of Singapore. So that is the amount of energy one process of distillation uses. The question is there no better way to separate ethylene from ethane except by distillation? And this is a question that I think we should ask. Separation of aromatics today If you take orthoxylene, metaxylene, paraxylene, we do by distillation, okay? They consume close to 50 gigawatts of electricity using distillation, crystallization sometimes, and simulated moving bed adsorption techniques. Huge amount of energy. Is there some better way to separate orthoxylene, metaxylene, and paraxylene? So it's an amazing opportunity, okay? In fact, distillation alone, okay, constitutes 10 to 15% of the global energy consumption in the chemical industry. 230 gigawatts of electricity equivalent, and with a significant contributor to carbon dioxide emissions, is all by distillation. The question is, are there better opportunities or better solutions than distillation going forward? And I think this is a fundamental question, because we are operating huge refineries around the world. 100 million barrels of crude is processed every day, and every one of us in this planet is consuming 2 liters of refined hydrocarbons in a refinery. So these are basic questions that one can ask. How do you separate hydrogen and nitrogen in ammonia plant? Hydrogen and hydrocarbon in petrochemical plants? How do you separate nitrogen from air? How do you remove carbon dioxide and water from natural gas? How do you remove organic vapor from nitrogen? So on and so forth. So all these are chemical engineering problems, and these have no satisfactory solutions even today. And I think these are real life problems that are waiting to be solved. I just want to give you an example of clean water for a minute, okay? Because water is also very important, because all chemical process industries use humongous amount of water, okay? And we all know this, because chemical process industries a large amount of water, and water is something that we don't have in this world. So water is what is called a constrained resource of this world. And in fact, if you look at it, by 2030, global demand for water will increase by 30%, and 50% of the world population will be short of fresh water. And this is an amazing slide which you can find on the web. 70% of our planet Earth is water, but unfortunately, 97.5% of the 70% is salt water in the ocean, which we cannot use. And less than 0.8% of the total water resources of the world is potable water, water that we can drink. So it is an amazing thing that we have something in plenty, but we can't use, you know, and that's the challenge of both chemistry and chemical engineering. And therefore, if you look at sustainable development goal, you will see that the 2030 goal, clean water, is one of the key sustainable development goals. All right, so we have enough ocean, we have a lot of water, but why is it that we can't convert that sea water into potable water? You may say, yes, it can be, all right, by desalination. But as chemical engineers, you must understand that the role of thermodynamics here, okay? And the role of thermodynamics here is that the minimum work required to overcome the entropy created when salt dissolves in water. You know, when salt is dissolved in water, okay, there is an increase in the entropy, okay? And when you, therefore, you want to remove the salt from the water, I have to compensate for the entropy by supplying energy, which is enthalpy, okay? And this is second law of thermodynamics. And when you do that, the basic problem is, you know, when you have a membrane, which is called the reverse osmosis membrane, you know, you actually pass brine through that at constant pressure. The retarding force imposed by the second law of thermodynamics increases with brine concentration. So as the brine concentration increases, your ability to separate the salt from the water decreases. And this is second law of thermodynamics. Nothing you can do about it, okay? This is a fact of, this is actually a law of nature, okay? Now, because of that, what has happened is you need energy to separate, and that energy is very large, and that's a problem. And the current state of the art, you know, you need 2.2 kilowatt hour of energy per meter cube. Now, people talk about efficient desalination membrane, they don't realize that the minimum that power you need is 0.75 kilowatt hour per meter cube. You can't go below this because this is the theoretical minimum. Actually, it is worse than this because of all kinds of energy losses. But you can't go. So there are sometimes people write papers in scientific journal as if they have cracked this problem. But this problem cannot be cracked because this is the problem of thermodynamics, and you can't crack this because this is the minimum energy required to remove salt from water, because you have to reverse the process of dissolution of salt in water, and that is essentially a law of thermodynamics. So what I'm trying to say is, many people don't understand this, and therefore they come back and say, we have an energy efficient process for desalination. But I ask them the question, what is energy efficiency? Sometimes I get numbers less than 0.75, and I tell them that this is impossible. Okay, you have got something wrong in your experiment, because you can't go below 0.75 kilowatt hour per meter cube of water in desalination. And that is laws of thermodynamics, and I think that's what chemical engineers learn to use. Well, what happens is, essentially, you require improvement in selectivity. The energy cost is prohibitive. That's the problem. That's why we can't take seawater and convert it to normal water. Okay, there's enormous amount of energy that we have to spend. We don't know how to dispose of the concentrated brine, because you're going to get, after even assuming that you're going to spend the money and energy, you're going to get a thick brine solution. What do you do with the brine solution? Where do you throw it? We don't know that. And lastly, we have no idea, of many more things. In fact, look at this. This is a kind of a nice circle I have drawn. You want potable water, right? All right. So what do? You do desalination. When you do desalination, I have to consume a lot of energy. And that energy is all electrical energy. And that electrical energy comes from fossil fuel or coal, essentially. So you increase the carbon dioxide load, all right, when you produce the energy required for desalination. Now, when you increase the carbon dioxide load, you cause global warming. And the global warming will influence the rainfall pattern. And the rainfall pattern, if it influences, your access to potable water is even less. So what do? You are in a catch-22 situation. And this is the kind of analysis that we need to do when we look at solutions for problems. Okay, so you want the solution for potable water, but actually the solution you're creating is going to reduce the amount of potable water in the environment. And is that the right thing to do? Well, think about it. Well, that's what you have to start thinking more. It's not such a simple thing that I can just desalinate water and make potable water. So these are fundamental questions that we need to ask. So I will skip this. I will leave these slides for you to see. The same thing is in catalytic transformation will continue to be the major driver for chemical engineering. In fact, the entire area of fine chemicals, specialty chemicals, even bulk chemicals are going to be now even more driven by advances in catalysis, and therefore the chemical engineering that will be relevant to reactor engineering and separation. And therefore, again, these are new challenges that we will face as we move forward. There is also a challenge in manufacturing technologies. I talked about it. You have to somehow rethink this concept of economies of scale. We can't build large plants anymore. We have to build smaller plants, but with the economics of the larger plants. Now, this imposes a huge amount of constraints in the design of chemical plant. And this is also a new challenge for chemical engineers, because it's no longer possible to build very large plants because there are consequences of building very large plants. And now people are saying, can I build smaller plants closer to the customer, where I don't have to spend transportation costs to move my product to the customer? Then the question is, can I make small plants economically viable? Because many of you who have been taught chemical engineering, you must have been taught about a scaling law, which says the larger the capacity, the lower is the operating cost. So that scaling law will have to be somehow changed. How do we change that scaling law? That's again a challenge for chemical engineers. Well, same way, today people are talking about resources that we extract from our bio resources. And if you want to extract resources from our biodiversity in terms of biomass, then how do I transform that into end products that you and I can use? And this is leading to what is called this concept of biorefinery, where you have a combination of biology, biotechnology, chemistry and chemical engineering all coming into play. And how do we therefore define or design efficient biorefineries in order to take biomass and convert them into products that you and I can use? Just like we took petroleum and converted them into products that you and I can use, can we substitute part of the petroleum from biomass? Now, this is a question that is currently being raised, and there are challenges here. My own feeling is, those of you who want to read more about it, I've given a reference here. My own understanding of this is you need what is called an integration of a petroleum refinery with a biorefinery. Now, it's not easy. I mean, it's easy to say that, but it's very difficult to do. But in my opinion, in the future, you will see that refineries based on petroleum and biomass refineries will be integrated. Okay. And that integration will bring great efficiency and value. And I don't have time to speak about it, but I think that's the way the world is moving. And I see this happening maybe in the next 15, 20 years. Well, I'll skip this slide. The last is, of course, the chemical engineers will be required to manage energy transition. And today we are predominantly using carbon-based energy, okay? We have to go to renewable energy. How do you make this transition from carbon-based energy to renewable energy? And many people have said that you can't make this transition in a single step. It's impossible to do so for various reasons. And I think as a chemical engineering student, you must ask this question: why is it so difficult to make a transition from a carbon-based energy resource to a renewable resource? There are enough challenges ahead of us. And therefore, many people believe that a biomass derived energy could be a bridge that would make this transition easier. Now, this is an open question at this point of time, but again, chemical engineering is the one that is providing some of the more critical answers to this question today. And I think therefore, chemical engineers will have to think about this particular problem more in their thinking. And lastly, since you people belong to a pharmaceutical industry promoted university, I was wondering whether you ever ask yourself, what is the role of chemical engineering in a pharmaceutical manufacturing science? And most people think that pharmaceutical manufacturing is actually all organic chemistry. I think it is wrong. And I think for long, organic chemists have dominated pharmaceutical industry. And I think this has been to the detriment of this industry. And I think it is now time for a change. I think chemical engineers must get hands-on to understand how to improve efficiencies in a pharmaceutical industry. I think this could be a unique positioning of your university because you have a department of chemical engineering. And I think you should focus, in my opinion, not on petrochemicals, not on oil and gas, but you could focus as a department to look at how do I use the principles of chemical engineering to enhance the pharmaceutical manufacturing science. And I think very few engineering analysis has been done. And I quote a very beautiful paper that I read a few years ago. I think all of you who have not read this paper must read this paper, because I think it kind of tells you these tremendous opportunities in chemical engineering that is actually crying today in pharmaceutical manufacturing. And I think pharmaceutical manufacturing should not be looked as the kind of a domain of organic chemists. I think it has to be looked at as a domain of organic chemists and chemical engineers, just like other disciplines of chemical industry have done. And I think this is something that I encourage all of you to think about it, because this could also be a positioning of your department as you grow into a niche department which is focused and which has expertise to provide chemical engineering solutions to the pharmaceutical industry. And this is a very important component. Whether it's formulation, whether it is API manufacturing, whether it is anything that you do, tableting, whether it is formation of a emulsion or a syrup, everything has got deep engineering science. And I think this is something that you will have to start thinking about, and maybe you have a nice link with your own enterprise that is part of your university, and maybe that could offer you, maybe your future students may become the leaders in this discipline as we move forward. Well, lastly, a few slides. I think I'm going to make this very fast. And this is what I call the last slide, but it's actually a very important area called sustainable development. And sustainable development is something that we have been talking about, and that's going to be the defining component of the future of this planet. Because if we don't contribute to sustainable development, this planet's existence in the next few hundred years is, in my opinion, in grave doubt. And therefore, this is an important domain of knowledge that I think all of our students must get. And therefore, I think engineering, chemical engineering students must also gain this understanding of what it is called sustainable development. Well, I will not talk about the sustainable development goals. And I think this we all know is basically because we are a population of growing to 10 billion, and our consumption has increased. And this consumption has led to depletion of all kinds of resources of the environment. And therefore, we have to look at this as a major global problem that science and engineering will have to address. Sustainability is called a wicked problem. And again, there's a beautiful paper. I give you the reference. Those of you who want to read it, please go and read it. It's a wicked problem because it's a complex problem. And there are no easy solutions to this problem. Because there are no easy solutions, people shy away from looking at this problem. Because we all like to solve problems that are easy. We don't like to solve problems which are complex because we feel that we may not get the credit for it, right? So, but unfortunately, the real life problems are complex problems, and that's sustainability is a complex problem. Climate change, energy and water resource management, waste disposal, biodiversity loss, all these things are complex problems which requires multiple disciplines to come and solve. And this is one of the reasons why we feel so helpless today, because as individual disciplines, we cannot address these areas. And therefore, if you ask me what is the role of science and engineering for the future of this planet, it is only looking at these kinds of complex problems. Well, unfortunately, and this is a journalist and satirist, Harold Mencken, who said for every complex question, there's a simple answer, and it is invariably wrong. And that's a problem also, because we take a very complex question and we try to provide a very simple answer. And the simple answer is invariably wrong. And I think we must not fall into this trap. So what is the problem? The problem is the materials that we consume flow from the ecosphere to the human economy. And we consume these materials, we use these materials in the human economy, and we throw it out into the ecosphere. Now, this is a flow which is from ecosphere to the economy, which is called the human economy, and for the human economy back to the ecosphere, but this is a linear process. Okay, this is not a cyclic process. This is a linear process, and that's where the damage is occurring to the environment. All right, therefore, we have problems today. Okay, and those of you who are interested, read this book. It's an amazing book which talks about why civilizations fail. Civilizations fail because we fall into what is called an entropy trap, from which we cannot escape. Okay, and what is the entropy trap? When we consume resources, we convert ecological wealth into economic wealth. Okay, and we become excited about it because this is what we call development, right? Development is more riches for human beings. Now what happens? We don't live in an inexhaustible world, and therefore eventually, because available energy and resources can no longer maintain the existing level of complexity, Actually, we are trying to live by borrowing from the future. And that is a problem. As massive demands collide with dwindling supplies of natural resources, civilization begin to implode. Because we're consuming a whole lot of things and we don't have resources of that type in the nature. And humans in this complex adaptive ecosystem can control almost nothing. Yet, we have the power of technology to influence everything. Now, this is the biggest danger we face. Please understand this statement because this is the biggest danger we face. We can't control anything around us in the nature. Yet, we have this power of technology that empowers us to do everything that we think we can do. Now, I can give a whole lot of examples for this, but I don't have the time to do so. I will just skip this for a minute and I will show you that our global resource extraction is exponentially rising. In fact, whether it is metals, whether it is hydrocarbons, whether it is biomass, whether it is non-metallic minerals, everything they're consuming at a rate which is unsustainable. And at this rate, when we consume, basically what happens is that we are going to exhaust the periodic table. Okay, and this is what I call the sustainability of the elements in the periodic table. The periodic table, we are going to wipe it clean. No element will be left in the periodic table after 300 to 500 years because of our consumption. But you may say, what is the problem? Because we know that there is a law of conservation of matter. So nothing can be destroyed or created, right? So where does all the used material go? It goes into our waste. But then why can't we recover from the waste? But that's where entropy comes in again. Thermodynamics comes in. When you take concentrated forms of matter and throw it away in a very dilute form, what are you doing? You're actually increasing entropy. And therefore, if you want to recover this material from the dilute stream, I have to spend energy. And therefore, I'm again caught in a catch-22 situation. I have to spend energy. Now, where will this energy come from? And that's a problem. So, therefore, it's very nice to say that metals and minerals are laws of conservation of nature, it's indestructible, but they are not indestructible. They are not immutable because they are in principle available, but they are not available in a form that is economical for us to extract from. So that's a problem. And that is a real problem that this world will face as we move forward. So I will skip this. This is just an example I tell students about there are what is called elements in a periodic table. The elements in your mobile phone, which is about 40 elements of your periodic table. Okay, you don't have to go to a periodic table to learn about elements. It's all there on a mobile phone. And the problem is every mobile phone you are throwing these elements away. And the question basically is, how do you recover them back? And that's a challenge. Okay, so we have 1 ton of mobile phone. They actually can give you 300 times more gold than a ton of gold ore, or 6.5 times more silver than a ton of silver. But then it's going to be exceedingly energy intensive to extract this gold and silver from a dilute stream back into gold and silver that we can use. So these are the challenges. So thermodynamics of sustainability, I call it. And that, by the way, those of you who are interested in this, there is a beautiful article called Entropy and Energy towards the definition of physical sustainability, because ultimately this world is driven by entropy and energy. Okay, I mean, and I think that's what chemical engineers learn. And I hope that all of you appreciate that when you generate a waste stream, you're generating a very dilute stream, which is increased entropy. Now you can only concentrate them back into a concentrated process or a concentrated product, if you can compensate for the loss of entropy by supplying enthalpy, right? So that's your second law of thermodynamics. Therefore, from a sustainability point of view, any process that increases entropy is less sustainable, okay? And this is something that you can calculate, by the way, whenever you look at a process. And you can calculate what is the level of entropy increase that is happening during your process. Well, I will skip this. I don't have the time to talk about some of these things because I'm running late. I'm going to skip some of these slides. I will leave this slide with you for the future. And if you want to therefore look at a sustainability problem, you have to go beyond what I call reductionist thinking. And the reductionist thinking is basically, this is a kind of thinking that we need to start looking at. And this, ideally, chemical engineers are suited to look at this kind of a thinking. Chemists are not suited to this kind of a thinking because chemists are too preoccupied with atoms and molecules. But chemical engineers are the people who design things. Okay, and therefore when they start designing things, they are able to create new forms of matter, new forms of processes which could be more sustainable. Then you start building it from the bottom, which is called the reductionist approach. So design is the top of this pyramid, and this is where I believe that chemical engineers make a very valuable contribution. And once you have a design and you have a data, you can actually use a large amount of data and information, to do very good design. And that design is what is going to drive sustainability in the future. And therefore, we call this a systems thinking. So you don't start from molecules or, or processes or products. You actually start from what you want to accomplish in the process. Okay. And once you know what you want to accomplish by the design of the process or product, you start thinking about all the elements that are required. And this is a kind of an approach that I think we need to increasingly build into our thinking, and we call it systems thinking. And chemical engineers are ideally suited for systems thinking. Chemists are not good at systems thinking. And eventually what he has to do is, when you want to look at systems thinking, you have to understand all the cycles that are going on in the world, because ultimately nature has designed this universe in the form of cycles. When everything is returned back to nature after the use, humans have designed processes and technology in a linear fashion. That's what I said. From the ecosphere to the human economy to the ecosphere, it was a linear process. And therefore, our ability to understand and close this cycle is critical for sustainability of resources on planet. And this is, I cannot explain to you more today. This is actually, I give about 10 lectures on this in terms of how do we use chemistry and chemical engineering to understand these cycles. And these are also very important component of sustainability education. Well, therefore, if I look at today's chemical sector and tomorrow's chemical sector, I see a huge change in the process. Okay, and this is going to happen in the next decades or so. So I think our education must embed these principles in order to appreciate how the tomorrow's chemical sector will look like. And I will skip this. And I think, when I look at sustainable development, there are two pillars to sustainable development. I call it circularity and systems thinking. Both are extremely important. And systems thinking in science and engineering is something that we need to inculcate in our young people. Okay, so many of us did not grow with this, but now we have to teach them these things, how to start thinking in terms of systems. When you look at a problem, and there are many documentation, publication that are now coming, which will help us to do so. This is basically called the one of the approaches to systems thinking, which was recently published in Nature Sustainability. Have a look at this, and I think it will give you a clue as to how to approach this problem. And there's another problem which is called process system engineering, which is again a very nice way of synthesizing the system as a whole when you look at a problem. And this is which is very similar to systems thinking in the area of in the slide I showed earlier, but in a different way it looks at. And lastly, there is a framework which is now becoming very important in understanding all engineering sciences, including chemical engineering sciences, and this is called the Planetary Boundaries Framework. And this is, again, I don't have time to explain this. Planetary boundaries framework, whether it's for water, whether it's for energy, whether it's for effluent, whether it's for acidification of the ocean, whether it's for land system change, everything will have to be factored in, when you look at a chemical process design now. And that is again a framework that we now have, so that we start thinking in terms of these new frameworks when we look at the next design of processes our products in our society. And again, this is another way. This is a stage gate model which enables you to match your process development stage gates with sustainability metrics. And I think this is again a very powerful way of thinking how to integrate process design with sustainability. And this is again published data. It's available in a publication, so people can go and read about it. I don't have time to explain all these things now. And lastly, you have to enhance efficiency. You have to emulate nature. You have to exercise what is called precautionary principle, and you have to maintain resilience of the overall system. And the word resilience is very important in systems thinking. Do not perturb supporting systems beyond their ability to recover from disturbances. And this is a very important principle that we have to keep in mind. And lastly, there are, I call it 5 sustainability challenges, which again I will skip, I don't have the time. And a couple of slides are close. When you wish to achieve results that have not been achieved before, it is unwise fancy to think that they can be achieved by using methods that have been used before. Therefore, we have to think of new methods. Okay, existing methods will not solve future problems. For solving future problems, we need new methods. And that is what I talk about it. And I talked about it today. And lastly, the greatest danger in times of turbulence, we are at this point of time, the planet is in a state of turbulence. Let's understand that. It's not the turbulence. The turbulence is not the problem. The problem is we should not act with yesterday's logic. And that's a problem. And I leave this. This is what I call the present and the future of chemical engineering. And lastly, if we teach today's student as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. So this is something which is, I think every teacher must keep in mind. Okay. And I think you are preparing a student for tomorrow, and you can't teach him as you were taught yesterday. Okay. And that is a lesson that I think we must keep. Every day we teach a class. I hope that some of you remember this statement, and you have to do it differently. If you don't do it differently, you are robbing the students of their tomorrow. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I took a little longer time than necessary, but I think that's the end of my talk. And I conclude here by saying a big thanks and your patience for your patient listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Indeed, it was a very good talk. Like every one of us have got enlightened with the insights of chemical engineering, and we are highly motivated with your talk, sir. Not only that, you have emphasized on the role of catalysts in the modern chemical engineering, and I'm pretty much sure that everyone would be agreeing that it was a very captivative talk.
Thank
And
you.
not only that, sir, we would like to hear more from you. Because of time constraint,
Yes.
we had to hold ourselves back. But last thing I would like to say, sir, what you have said, if we teach today's students as we have taught yesterday's, then we would rob them of tomorrow. I totally agree to it, sir. Thank you so much. Quickly, we would be moving to the Q&A
Yeah, please.
session, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the first question is from Dr. Paulami Sen-Gupta. So her question is, what is your view about the field of basic chemistry in the next 100 years from now?
Oh,
A chemistry question.
what is basic chemistry? I already told you, chemistry is 3 dimensions of chemistry. Okay. Okay,
It
the chemistry of
ignores
materials.
students.
Okay. So I told you there are 3 dimensions of chemistry. Okay. And all the 3 dimensions will be very useful for the next several decades. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if you ask me 100 years, I don't know. 100 years is not something I like to predict, but I'm saying definitely in the next 10 to 20 years, you know, this is where chemistry is moving, you know. So chemistry of life, chemistry of, you know, nature. How do you learn from nature and do chemistry? The chemistry of life's processes, the chemistry of materials. Materials I use, by the way, when I use the word materials, I use it in a very broad sense. Okay. And I think that's what chemistry is all about. So I don't know, follow me. I can talk to you much in much more detail later. But I don't want to say 100 years, but I think they are going to be important. But I think we see the directions today. Okay, I mean, how it will change will depend upon many things. But some of the fundamental directions will not change. Okay, so and when we look at all the 3, chemistry of materials, chemistry of, you know, life's processes, our nature's processes, and chemistry of sustainability, I think these are going to be critical for our planet. Okay, and our future of this planet is going to depend upon what solutions we bring in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one more question. Like, what do you think about increasing usage of polymers, and what can we do the solution to control it?
I have to give another talk for that. Okay. Okay.
Indeed, sir, we would love to have one sooner.
So I give a 1 hour talk on that separately.
Yeah.
I don't have time now, but I tell you what, I emphasize in this slide itself that the key, principle of sustainability is, as human beings, we must learn to reduce our consumption. Okay. If we do not reduce our consumption, there is no way this planet is going to be hurtled towards a disaster. Okay. Because we have no resources on this planet to satisfy 10 billion people for the next 1,000 years. Okay. So when I talk about 1,000 years there, I mean right, because this planet has survived today for how many billions of years, right? So this planet has no lifetime. But we are talking about 500 years and 1,000 years in a planet which is billions of years old. And we are saying that our consumption has become so unsustainable that we cannot survive on this planet. This planet will disappear. Okay? Because there's no way it can sustain life on this planet. All right. Therefore, that's what I wanted you to read that book called Why Civilizations Fail. Okay. Civilizations fail because of unbridled consumption, greed, and unbridled consumption. So you may say, what can I do? I'm just one person in 1 billion, 10 billion. Now what can I do? But I'm saying if each one of us can reduce our consumption a little bit, okay, we would have done a world a service. Maybe we would have extended the life of this world by a few thousand years. All right. So do not think that you are helpless because I am just alone. Each one of us are important. And so when we talk about resources, now you can't say I want to use the resources as much as I can, yet I don't want to have any problem. This is not possible. Okay. So I always say, okay, there may be other solutions. Technology will come up with small solutions. But the key question of sustainability, and that's why I showed that book, which is called Why Civilizations Fail. And that is basically excessive consumption. And excessive consumption will not sustain this planet. So keep that in mind. So whether you're using plastics, whether you're using anything, your mobile phone, or whether you're using something else, please make sure that you don't throw it out or you don't just change it for the heck of it. Okay? Use it as long as you can. Maybe another model has come, but maybe you don't. Maybe you may not want to buy another model. Okay, a new model in order to throw away your old model. Okay, so make sure that every decision you make in your personal life, you are saying, am I reducing consumption? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So we have many questions which has to be answered. So I request all the participants to please, what we say, mail, sir. I mean, there
Yeah,
are
you can do
many
one thing.
questions.
You can ask them
Yeah.
to mail it to me at my
Yes, sir.
email, and generally I answer all the questions. Okay.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. One of the participants was quickly saying it was a very informative session and we got all the vision for our future work. And this talk has really motivated them.
Thank you.
So
By the way,
this is what the participants.
I'm going to share this presentation with you. So especially those of, you may have an intranet or something like that in your university. So you can
Yes.
post it on your intranet and your students can have a look at it. Okay. And I encourage them to go and read some of the papers that I've cited because I didn't have the time to in detail, but I think it's important for them to go and read them and understand them.
Yes, sir. Now, quickly, I request Dr. Amish Vyas to come for the concluding mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. It was, in fact, complete picture of chemical engineering, right from development of chemical engineering to the what will be the future of chemical engineering. At the same time, it's a bridge between, you have set a bridge between chemistry, that is science, and engineering both in general. And I do believe that science is the fundamental foundation of the engineering, and then you can move towards the engineering at larger scale. So it is only a problem of scaling up, nothing else over there, but the basic work done by the science people over there. So I must believe in that part. Also, sir, you have very nicely cleared one question, which is in the mind of so many people and parents also, they are literally confused that what is the difference between BTech and BE. And you have made it very much clear that BTech, that is basically practice intensive, and BE, that is the system intensive. So it is more rational, whereas BTech, you go with the more empirical kind of the things. So it is more practical rather than theoretical part over there. And yes, sir, we do believe in the sustainability, and we have to go with the sustainability. And we Indian are very good in sustainability. Even we are not wasting a simple cloth after wearing it after over a period of time. We use it till the last thread of the that cloth is available to us. So we are highly sustainable people. We believe in sustainability, and that is why even in economic crisis, we stood like a man. We stood very strongly in the world. And yes, always I am saying this thing to my students. If you want to understand the chemical engineering or chemistry, natural chemistry is available since long on the world, but if you want to really understand it, kitchen is the best example where you are mixing so many things. We are using all the unit operations in the kitchen, like RO you said, that is also available in the kitchen, and we face the problem from RO. We can understand the problem in the flow because of the deposition on the RO, and reduction in the capacity of the RO, everything that we are studying over there. And it is a very one comment I received from the Praveen Kodgire, who is a associate professor at PDPU. He said that now this is the high time to go with the modular curriculum. We need to rethink about it in chemical engineering. So yes, it is a high time to think about this part also. So sir, thank you very much, giving a very much insight about the chemistry, chemical engineering, and its future and education everywhere, how it can be dealt with. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think all my comment is that you should relook at what you teach in chemical engineering. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And, please have a review and look at it again and see whether what you're teaching is going to prepare your students for the future. And not what you or I learned when we were students. So,
Okay,
Yes.
Dr. Sivaram,
yeah.
that's what I was telling him, convincing that we must invite you and who will give the view of everything. So we have heard breaking chemical engineering from a chemist, from an organic chemist. So you can see that, actually we are losing the boundary. All science are merging today in one. Because the problem is global, one problem. Then all sciences have to be put their head together and solve this problem. I think that's what exactly he tried to summarize in later slides. This is not only chemist problem or chemical engineering, it's a biology, physicist, mathematics, social, politician, everybody. Because everybody is going to face problem of sustainability later on. So I think your take-home message is very clear, and we like to have your slides. So
Yeah,
that,
I'll send it. I will just send it in another half an hour. Okay.
okay, very good, very good.
So and you can share it with anybody whom you feel like in your.
Sure. Your Palombi student is doing very well.
Who, Polemy is there, right?
I have so confidence. You wrote one letter, I hired. That's it. IICT also, I took 2 of your student in Polymer.
I know.
Just for you wrote, I took. So that is the kind of confidence I have.
Thank you, sir. No,
That is the kind of
I
training.
I hope, I see from your early presentation on the university, I see it's a very, very good place for a, high creativity, for people. So I hope that they all exercise their highest forms of creativity, and come up with new ideas and solutions.
Sure, sure. Okay.
One of these days when things improve, I will come and see all of you. So personally.
Sure. Once
Thank you,
this,
sir.
once pandemic is over, I'll invite you to come here. Okay.
Yeah. Once this pandemic settles down a little bit.
Okay. I hope you have vaccinated now.
I have vaccinated. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. We would love to see you soon in the campus. Now, before I go to vote of thanks, I request Mr. Abhinand Pandya to speak up a few words on this occasion.
Not waste a lot of time for sir. We are fortunate that Sivaraman sir has been here, and whatever he has said, it is like we are going to cherish a single word for us, because for the beginning to end, I was not able to blink my eyes and move out, because basics of science, which is catered to taking it to basic Bosch process to invention, going there from great to good things, and also the futuristic thing, which is like desalination and how it is going to hamper the world. So he has taken the full round. And also to my friends, he has given a good advice that you don't separate biology, because Nobel Prize, if you look at the last 4 years, it's all going to biology, it's the chemists there. So you cannot separate it. And that's why all the talks, that's why I say we are going to cherish every individual single word of sir, and we are thankful by heart. Sir, you have been here and we are blessed to have your say.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I second your thoughts. Now, moving forward to our vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank from the bottom of my Professor S. Sivaraman, sir, for his beautiful and capitative talk and valuable time. And I thank our Provost, J.S. Yadav, sir, who continuously motivates us in research, and our Dean, School of Engineering, Dr. Amish Vyas, who is ever ready to give us immense guidance and support in every possible way he could. And Dean, School of Sciences, Dr. Bharati Dave, we thank you for your support and cooperation. And I also thank our very own strategic project manager, Mr. Abhinand Pandya, who unconditionally supports us, and Dr. Namrata Bajaj, who is ever ready to help. Also, I couldn't thank enough Dr. Siddhant Patel, Department of Chemical and Biochemical Engineering, who put loads of efforts to make it success, and Dr. Alok Tripathi to support him. Also, I would like to thank Assistant Professor Mr. Bhavesh Jain and CSE student Nikhil Sheikh for his technical and IT support. Admission team, I would like to thank admission team, all the HODs, R&D department, teaching and non-teaching staff, and all the people who have directly or indirectly supported to make this a grand success. Thank you, one and all, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
your time. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. I'm logged off. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dr. Sivaram.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Sure.